it'd be better to get at least started with this small load. There's a few illuminations, a bunch of the small text, and then some just general scripture. Load's coming down now.
The team set about the job eagerly, excited to see what treasures they had discovered. It soon became clear from the colophons in the texts that these copies had been made in Bönpo at the time of the first king of Mustang, Zangpo, who probably reigned in the 14th century. Most of the texts turned out to be important sutra and tantra scriptures. One exciting find was the Kamchen Tongtrak Japa. This is one of Bön's main sutras, consisting of the discourse of the Buddha of Bön, Tonpa Sherab Miwo. Originally, it was in 16 volumes. It is commonly believed that early Bön was a largely shamanistic tradition, based solely on rituals, with no higher teachings mapping out the path of liberation, and with no written texts. This text, the Kamchen, found here in the Mardzang cave, clearly puts paid to this notion. It contains teachings on compassion, the 10 parameters, the 5 paths, and so it gives clear instructions on the path to liberation. The colophon here clearly shows that this text was commissioned even before Zangpo became king. Here it says, the Great Secretary of Defense, Zangpo, commissioned the text and used it as a practice manual. And so this Kamchen text alone is clear proof that ancient Bön did indeed include ultimate teachings. The Kamchen was translated from the Shangshung language by the great Shangshung yogi and scholar Tongjung Tuchen, working with the Tibetan scholar Sharin Uchen. During the persecutions in the reign of the Tibetan king Drigum Tsenpo, it was hidden and rediscovered by the great master Shenchen Luga in the 11th century. Another significant find was 3 volumes of a text known as the Lubum. All 3 volumes are the speech of Buddha Tonpa Sherab, and Bönpos believe they were translated from the language of Shangshung into Tibetan. Among other texts discovered were many important texts of Bönpo Sutra and Tantra. The caves had obviously been looted over the years, and the team were dismayed to discover the title pages of the majority of texts were missing. Title pages are always extremely beautiful, written in exquisite calligraphy with silver and gold paint, worth a lot to looters. Many pages had neat holes cut in them where the illustrations had been removed, quite recently it would seem. But luckily, several of these beautiful pictures remained intact. After 2 days of hard but satisfying work, Geshe gelek was full of enthusiasm to try to discover the exact location of the ancient monastery of Bönpo, which had been mentioned in the colophons. So they asked around the local people, and one old man from Mustang turned out to be an expert on local history. He said that the ruins of the stupas, monasteries and villages in that area were all Bönpo, and he mentioned Bönpo too. When Geshe gelek heard this name again, he immediately asked its whereabouts. The old man pointed to the northwest mountains. And so the travellers eagerly set off in that direction. In days gone by, Bönpo was a vast monastery, a hive of learning and practice. The texts mention it by name, but few details are known. This lack of information goes back to the time when Indian Buddhism was introduced into Tibet. This triggered a wave of antagony towards Bön. Many monasteries were destroyed and texts were systematically burned. So not many textual sources survived this persecution. One of the most complete biographies is that of the great Dzogchen master, Yangten Sherab Gyaltsen, a lineage holder of the Shangshung Nyenju. According to his biography, at that time the monastery was still functioning. We also know that this Sherab Gyaltsen was closely associated with such lamas as Drutong Jetsung, Sebon Trejal and Larinyempo. Historical records clearly state that these lamas all lived in the first quarter of the 11th century. So by fitting the pieces of the puzzle together, Geshe gelek was able to deduce that the great monastery of Bönpo must have been thriving as late as the 11th century. The ruins of Bönpo clearly show it was once a huge monastery. The buildings are in 2 levels. Local people still call it Bönpo and say that the upper levels were occupied by the high lamas, while monks lived on the lower level. Geshe gelek had never imagined it could be such a large place. In the centre of the complex are the ruins of the Seikang, or main temple. These are flanked by the other buildings, which form 5 layers. Outside are rings of many ruined stupas. The whole complex looks like a big mandala. We cannot understand clearly from the historical texts exactly when the monastery was destroyed, but according to the local people, the nearby Sakya monastery, Namgyal Gompa, was constructed with the materials from Bönpo, which was ransacked at that time. Another place the old man of Mustang had mentioned was a cave not far from the ruins of Bönpo. The local people simply call it Bönpo, the Bönpo cave, and Geshe gelek was keen to find out whether it could be the cave of the great Dzogchen master Rongom Togme Jigpo. The biographies of the Shangshung Nyenju masters say that Rongom Togme Jigpo received the Shangshung Nyenju Dzogchen teachings from his root master Tse Dewa Ringmo. They also say he practiced in a cave where he saw neither the sun by day nor the moon by night. The texts also say the cave was located to the right of Bönpo. To their great delight, they discovered that the location and orientation of this cave exactly matched the descriptions in the texts. This was indeed the rocky hermitage of Rongom Togme Jigpo. Historical sources say that Yangtun Sherab Gyaltsen met him and received Dzogchen teachings here, so we can be sure that this hermitage was a place of practice in the late 10th century. The group left the holy cave and went on to the ruins of the Bönpo settlement of Jaragang, only 400 meters to the west of Lomantang. The area is dotted with the ruins of stupas. One larger one is still standing, although the top has collapsed. The local people told the pilgrims many sad stories about the dark times of the religious wars between Buddhists and Bonpos, when all the relics from within the stupas were looted. Later on, when Geshe Gelek visited Sakya Namjal Gompa, an old monk showed him around the monastery and the Gun Kang, or Protector's Temple. Unfortunately, we were not allowed to film here, but one of the holy items there is a huge copper pot. The old monk explained it had come from within the Jaragang stupa. He also said that according to legend, when the stupa was ransacked, the pot suddenly flew into the air by itself. It washed itself by falling into the river, from where it was recovered and taken to the Namjal Sakya monastery. The pot is still considered a holy object, and the local people offer katas to it. Throughout this trip, Geshe Gelek was confronted by the ruins of so many monasteries, stupas, and villages where his religion had once flourished, and the local villagers had many heart-rending stories to tell the Lama about the black times. The thought that such atrocities had been committed in the name of religion saddened him deeply. But, seeking solace in his meditation, he remembered teachings on impermanence, so fundamental to both Buddhism and Bön path, and his sadness lifted. At other times, the Lama was elated at finding so many historical treasures. Until now, the group has been travelling all around Lomantang, but now we are heading back to Lower Mustang. As promised, the group went to Giling village to visit the Bön families there. They were given a warm welcome by Jigme Wangjal and his family. They are related to a branch of the Lubra Labon line, currently held by Lama Tsultrim. The founder of this Labon branch